August 31st, 1985. A Saturday morning in East Los Angeles, a man walked into a convenience store, disheveled and sweating despite the early hour. He noticed his face on the front page of every newspaper, displayed at the counter, the composite sketch that police had finally released after months of investigation. His name was Richard Ramirez, age 25, and he was the most wanted man in California, the serial killer known as the Night Stalker, who had terrorized Southern California for over a year. He ran from the store, tried to carjack a vehicle, but the owner fought back and neighbors heard the commotion. A crowd formed, chasing him through the streets of East LA, and they caught him, held him down, beat him until police arrived to take him into custody. The capture of Richard Ramirez ended 14 months of terror that had gripped California, a period when people slept with guns under their pillows, when hardware stores sold out of locks and alarm systems, when entire communities lived in fear that the Night Stalker would choose their home next. Between June 1984 and August 1985, Ramirez killed at least 13 people, attacked dozens more, raped, tortured, and terrorized victims ranging from children to elderly couples. His crimes had no pattern beyond brutality, no logic beyond Satan worship, and a thirst for violence. This is the story of Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, one of California's most notorious serial killers, whose crimes shocked the nation and whose courtroom behavior, flashing satanic symbols and declaring allegiance to evil, made him infamous even among. Ricardo Leyva Muñoz Ramirez was born February 29, 1960. In El Paso, Texas, the youngest of 5 children in a Mexican-American family. His father, Julian Ramirez, worked on the railroad and was reportedly abusive, violent toward his wife and children, creating a household marked by fear and instability. Richard suffered 2 serious head injuries as a child, one from a swing set accident at age 5, and another from a dresser falling on him at age 6, injuries that some experts believe caused brain damage that contributed to his violent behavior. He began having epileptic seizures after these injuries, adding to his physical and psychological struggles. But the most damaging influence in Richard's life was his older cousin, Miguel Mike Ramirez, a Vietnam War veteran who moved in with the family when Richard was 12. Mike told Richard graphic stories about his time in Vietnam, showed him Polaroid photographs of Vietnamese women he had raped and killed during the war, teaching the young boy that violence and sexual assault were not just acceptable, but sources of pride and power. In 1973, when Richard was 13, he witnessed Mike shoot and kill his wife during an argument, an event that traumatized Richard but also reinforced Mike's teachings about violence. And by his teenage years, Richard was heavily using drugs, particularly marijuana and LSD, and had dropped out of high school. He began breaking into homes to steal, supporting his drug habit through burglary. And he moved to California in his early 20s, living in cheap hotels in Los Angeles, surviving on petty theft and burglary. During this period, he became increasingly obsessed with Satanism, reading books about devil worship, listening to heavy metal music, particularly AC/DC's album Highway to Hell, and developing a worldview where violence was not only acceptable, but a form of worship. By 1984, Richard Ramirez was ready to graduate from burglary to murder, and California would suffer for it. The first murder attributed to Richard Ramirez occurred on June 28, 1984, in Glassell Park, Los Angeles, when he broke into the home of 79-year-old Jenny Vinco, through an unlocked window, sexually assaulted her. Police had no leads, no witnesses, nothing to connect this brutal murder to anything, and they classified it as a random home invasion gone wrong. But it wasn't random. It was the beginning of a pattern, and Ramirez would strike again, though there would be a 9-month gap before his next confirmed attack, a period where he may have committed other crimes that were never linked to him. On March 17, 1985, the attacks resumed with increased frequency and brutality. Ramirez shot and killed 34-year-old Dale Okazaki in her Rosemead condominium, then drove to Monterey Park, where he dragged 30-year-old Tsai Lian Yu from her car and shot her, leaving her to die on the street. Just 10 days later, on March 27th, he brutally attacked 64-year-old Vincent and 44-year-old Maxine Zazara in Whittier, shooting Vincent in the head while he slept, then raping and... Between March and August 1985, Ramirez attacked approximately once every 2 weeks, striking throughout Southern California with no predictable pattern of location, victim type, or method. He killed elderly couples and young women, Asians and whites and Hispanics, people in wealthy neighborhoods and working-class areas. Sometimes he shot victims. Sometimes he beat them with blunt objects. Sometimes he stabbed them repeatedly. He often sexually assaulted female victims, drew satanic pentagrams on walls or on victims' bodies, and demanded jewelry and cash. His attacks seemed random, driven by opportunity and access, rather than any targeting, which made him nearly impossible to predict and even harder to catch. The media dubbed him the Night Stalker because all attacks occurred during nighttime hours, with Ramirez breaking into homes through unlocked doors and windows while residents slept. The nickname stuck, and as the body count rose and the terror spread, Californians became obsessed with home security, with news broadcasts warning people to lock windows and doors, to install better lighting, to be vigilant. Gun sales skyrocketed, with women in particular arming themselves for protection. Communities held meetings to discuss safety. Neighbors organized watch groups, and an entire region lived in fear that the Night Stalker would choose their home next. Police from multiple jurisdictions worked the cases, but for months they didn't realize they were looking for the same person, because the crimes varied so much in method and victim selection. It wasn't until investigators noticed similarities in shoe prints left at crime scenes, distinctive Avia athletic shoes that were relatively uncommon, that they began connecting the attacks. DNA evidence was still in its early stages, but was used to link several sexual assaults to the same perpetrator. Survivors who had seen the attacker described a tall, thin Hispanic male with bad teeth and a distinct smell of body odor. But composite sketches varied enough that no clear image emerged until August 1985, the breakthrough in the night. Stalker case came from an unlikely source, a teenager named James Romero III, who saw a suspicious orange Toyota station wagon in his Mission. Hours later, Ramirez broke into a nearby home and attacked 29-year-old Bill Carnes and his 27-year-old fiancée Inez Erickson, shooting Bill in the head and raping Inez. Young James gave police the license plate number he recorded, and within hours, police found the abandoned orange Toyota, stolen weeks earlier and left in a parking lot in Los Angeles. Inside the vehicle, forensic technicians found a single fingerprint on the rearview mirror, clear enough to run through Office, the automated fingerprint identification system that was still relatively new technology in 1985. On August 30th, the print came back with a match. Ricardo Richard Ramirez, a 25-year-old drifter with a criminal record for burglary and drug possession. Police now had a name, a face, and a rap sheet. They obtained photos from his previous arrests, created a composite that finally matched survivor descriptions, and on August 31st, 1985, they released Ramirez's name and photograph to every media outlet in California. That same morning, Richard Ramirez was in downtown Los Angeles, unaware that his face was now on the front page of every newspaper in the state. When he walked into a convenience store and saw his own image staring back at him from the newspapers, he panicked and ran. He tried to carjack a vehicle, but the owner fought back, and the commotion drew attention from neighbors in the predominantly Hispanic neighborhood of East LA. A crowd formed, recognizing him from the news, and they chased him through the streets shouting "El Matador," the killer. Ramirez was exhausted from drugs and lack of sleep, and the crowd caught him, held him down, beat him before police arrived to take him into custody. The arrest of Richard Ramirez ended the Night Stalker's reign of terror and allowed Southern California to exhale for the first time in over a year. The relief was palpable, the celebrations genuine, and the community that had lived in fear could finally sleep without terror. But the legal process was just beginning, and Richard Ramirez would prove to be as disturbing in the courtroom as he had been on the streets, turning his trial into a circus of satanic posturing and evil declarations that would make him infamous even among America's worst killers. Richard Ramirez's trial began in July 1988, nearly 3 years after his arrest, and it became one of the most sensational criminal trials in California history. From the moment he walked into the courtroom, Ramirez made clear he had no remorse and embraced his image as a satanic killer. He flashed a pentagram drawn on his palm to cameras, declared "Hail Satan" to reporters, and smirked at survivors and victims' families throughout the proceedings. He showed up to court wearing sunglasses, refusing to stand for the judge, treating the trial as if it were a performance where he was the star, rather than a defendant facing the death penalty. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence: DNA linking him to sexual assaults, fingerprints placing him at crime scenes, the distinctive Avia shoe prints found at multiple locations, ballistics evidence from the .22 caliber gun. Several survivors who had seen his face despite the darkness gave emotional testimony about the attacks, describing in detail what Ramirez had done to them and their loved ones. And their courage in facing him in the courtroom was extraordinary, given that he sat just feet away, staring at them, sometimes smiling. The defense had little to work with beyond arguing that the evidence was circumstantial or that identification was unreliable. But the case against Ramirez was overwhelming. His own behavior undermined any sympathy he might have generated, as he frequently disrupted proceedings, made satanic gestures, and at one point shouted to the courtroom, "You don't understand me. You are not expected to. You are not." These statements, along with his complete lack of remorse, made it clear that Richard Ramirez was proud of what he had done and saw himself as some kind of dark prophet rather than a serial killer. On September 20th, 1989, after 22 hours of deliberation, the jury found Richard Ramirez guilty on 13 counts of murder, 5 counts of attempted murder, 11 counts. The penalty phase followed, and on November 7th, 1989, the same jury recommended the death penalty. At his formal sentencing, Judge Michael Tynan said Ramirez's crimes showed cruelty, callousness, and viciousness beyond any human understanding, and sentenced him to death in California's gas chamber. Ramirez responded with the statement that would become his most infamous quote, "Big deal. Death always comes with the territory. I'll see you in Disneyland." Then he left The courtroom, still smiling. Richard Ramirez was sent to San Quentin State Prison to await execution. But like most death row inmates in California, he would spend decades in appeals rather than facing actual execution. During his years in prison, he received thousands of letters from fans and admirers, many from women who found him attractive or were drawn to his notoriety. One of these women, Doreen Lyoy, a magazine editor, began writing to Ramirez and visiting him. And despite warnings from her family and friends, she married him in 1996 in a prison ceremony, claiming she believed. Their marriage lasted until 2009, when she stopped visiting him. On June 7, 2013, Richard Ramirez died at age 53 in Marine General Hospital while still on death row. His death caused by complications from B-cell lymphoma, a form of blood cancer. He had spent 23 years on death row, never showing remorse, never expressing sympathy for his victims, maintaining to the end his embrace of satanic imagery and evil. His death meant he would never face execution for his crimes, never give his victims' families the satisfaction of seeing justice fully carried out. But it also ended any possibility of his eventual release through some legal technicality or change. The Night Stalker case left a lasting impact on California and on American true crime culture. It demonstrated the power of community involvement in catching dangerous criminals, as it was ordinary citizens who recognized Ramirez and captured him when police couldn't find him. It showed the importance of forensic technology, as fingerprint databases and DNA evidence were crucial to identifying and convicting him. And it exposed the vulnerability of suburban homes, changing how Californians thought about safety and security in ways that persist decades later, with better locks, alarm systems, and neighborhood awareness programs, all becoming. The case also raised uncomfortable questions about media coverage of serial killers and the celebrity culture that sometimes surrounds them. Richard Ramirez's trial was a media circus. His satanic posturing was broadcast widely, and he received fan mail from people fascinated by his evil. This phenomenon of killer groupies and true crime celebrity has only grown since the 1980s, with documentaries, podcasts, and social media giving serial killers posthumous fame they don't deserve. The Night Stalker case was one of the first to truly demonstrate this disturbing dynamic, where monsters become famous, and some people admire them for their notoriety rather than condemning them for their crimes. The victims of Richard Ramirez deserve to be remembered, not for how they died, but for who they were. Jenny Vinco, Dale Okazaki, Tsai Lian Yu, Vincent, and Maxine Zazara. Bill. The families who lost loved ones to the Night Stalker still mourn them, still live with the trauma of what happened. And they deserve justice and remembrance, more than Richard Ramirez ever deserved fame or notoriety. This has been the story of Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker who terrorized California between 1984 and 1985, killing at least 13 people and attacking dozens more in a 14-month reign of terror that changed. The story of a man whose childhood trauma and exposure to violence shaped him into a monster, whose embrace of Satanism gave him justification for brutality, whose attacks were random and vicious and designed to maximize terror. The story of an investigation that took months to connect the crimes, that used early forensic technology and community involvement to finally identify the killer, and that ended with his capture by an angry mob in East Los Angeles. The story of a trial where evil was on full display where Richard Ramirez showed no remorse and embraced his image as a satanic killer, and where justice was finally served with a death penalty sentence. And the story of a legacy that includes trauma for survivors, grief for victims' families, and lessons about community safety, forensic investigation, and the disturbing phenomenon of serial killer celebrity. Richard Ramirez is dead. His victims are remembered. And California has not forgotten the summer when the night stalker made everyone afraid of the dark.